Over 400 delegates from East African countries have attended the 20th East African Magistrates and Judges Association Conference in Kampala to diverse means of delivering justice to litigants. The 4-day conference was officiated by the Vice President Jessica Alupo, who represented President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni urged the magistrates and judges to focus on building public trust and confidence in executing their duties.
You must have also noted that the judicial system is confronted with a considerable backlog of cases and lengthy court procedures, which create a negative perception of judicial bodies in the eyes of the public. Enhancing public confidence should be a priority within judicial reforms in order to restore public trust, guarantee legal certainty, and timely justice. The attainment of this goal requires a combination of measures, including but not limited to the following. 1. Strategies for reducing case backlog and lengthy court proceedings. 2. Relieving the courts of cases which by their nature can be solved by quasi-judicial or traditional institutions. 3. Encouraging alternative dispute settlement mechanisms. 4. Encouraging enhanced use of ICT in court processes. 5. Reducing opportunities for corruption and positively fighting corruption. And lastly, simplifying court practices and procedures and making the justice process cheaper, among other interventions. It is my hope that the outcome of this conference will be to provide the East African judiciaries with a harmonized judicial system among the East African member countries. Let our people across the East African region be treated equally and justly while applying common standards and best judicial practices which should be agreed upon at this conference.
However, President Museveni highlighted on some of the challenges faced by the judiciary in East African countries, which need to be addressed.
Our people are only separated by artificial colonial boundaries that were created by unpatriotic masters. Our social values and justice needs remain the same. As we integrate economically and politically, we also need to harmonize our judicial systems. The judiciaries in the East African partner states need to apply common standards and best judicial practices across the region. I have often encountered public outcries by the Wananchi about the unfriendly workings of courts, including unclear procedures, unpleasant experiences such as long adjournments, delayed judgments, and corruption tendencies. We also need to harmonize our judicial systems. The judiciaries in the East African partner states need to apply common standards and best judicial practices across the region. I have often encountered public outcries by the Wananchi about the unfriendly workings of courts, including unclear procedures, unpleasant experiences such as long adjournments, delayed judgments, and corruption tendencies, among others. I have also encountered complaints about high costs of litigation, cumbersome court procedures, court summons and judgments written in foreign languages, discrimination against women, people with disabilities, and the poor, delayed execution of court orders, and people losing cases simply because of lack of legal knowledge, even when it is clear that they have a genuine claim.
Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs Norbert Mao cautioned the participants on the primitive practices that still exist in the justice system.
To discard the things that no longer make sense. Why would it make sense to break fish if the saucepan is big enough to accommodate the whole fish, simply because your mother did it? So we must interrogate the limits of precedent. I'm a lawyer myself, and there hasn't been a lawyer in the Ministry of Justice for a long time. So I am aware of what I am talking about. How do you deal with a legislature which is a moving target? Just when the judiciary want to settle the law, then you find the legislature is moving up and down. Fortunately, one of the greatest scholars I have ever found wrote and said, "The Constitution erects no barrier against legislative stupidity." So we go to the question of what is and what ought to be. Many times we concentrate on what ought to be. And I also hope that you'll therefore discuss what we normally say is judicial activism or judicial restraint. Which is which? To what extent should you be activist? To what extent should you restrain yourself and stick only to what is? Of course, we are human, and sometimes our judgments are flawed. But nevertheless, since society changes, it is important that we should also think about what we call oughtness. Shouldn't the law produce what we deem to be good? Finally, Your Excellency, I call upon all those assembled here. Don't abandon your moral and ethical positions. As lawyers, we are taught to argue both sides of the case. We plead the devil's case, we also plead God's case. And that brings us into the arena which is dangerous of what we call moral relativism. So you may end up not caring. So I am hoping that as part of your deliberations, you really insist on fighting for the things that you care about deeply. Those things that don't change. Those things that are your anchors. In other words, your moral and ethical positions.
Chief Justice Alfonso Winyidolo urged East African member states to create employment and learning opportunities for lawyers.
Here we share our experiences from the respective jurisdictions, but most importantly, to agree on best practices for solutions to these challenges. There is therefore need to think outside the box and determine how best we can afford justice seekers in our respective jurisdictions real and meaningful access to justice. Uganda has issued the advocates' professional requirements for admission of persons enrolled in foreign jurisdictions regulations, statutory instrument number 4 of 2020, which provide for the admission of lawyers from other jurisdictions to practice law in Uganda. This directly promotes legal education and legal practice across our borders and entrenches cohesion in the region. I encourage all the member states of the community to pick a leaf from this, as it will ensure the flow of legal knowledge and employment opportunities within the community. The East African Magistrates and Judges Association, acronym as IMJA, is a forum that brings together magistrates and judges in the region to share experiences on how best to dispense justice and uphold the rule of law, ensure the protection of human rights, preserve the sanctity of our judicial institutions, and avail access to justice. It is incumbent on members of the legal fraternity, being the custodians of the rule of law, to ensure that everyone in our respective jurisdiction enjoys secure protection of the law, regardless of their status or standing in life. I should emphasize that our actions and decisions have far-reaching consequences as they shape and determine the character of the social fabric of society. We must therefore always bear in mind the aspirations of the people that we serve. As a people, our values, norms, and aspirations are diverse and are determined by the socio-economic and religious settings in which we are born and nurtured.
He said the conference should be a stepping stone in overcoming the challenges that affect the judiciary in the East African countries.
I should emphasize that our actions and decisions have far-reaching consequences as they shape and determine the character of the social fabric of society. We must therefore always bear in mind the aspirations of the people that we serve. As a people, our values, norms, and aspirations are diverse and are determined by the socio-economic and religious settings in which we are born and nurtured. This calls for thoughtful decisions in order to be relevant and meaningful. Given our varied experiences, I believe this conference will help us appreciate our peoples better and thus render them better service. We have, in this conference, an opportunity to share experiences on reaping from alternative dispute resolution, ADR, justice mechanism, case backlog management, fighting corruption, and dealing with banking and environmental justice, among others. The ADR is a fast-rising justice phenomenon. Its beauty and relevance lies in the self-evident fact that it is in accord with our African traditional justice system. Uganda held a national conversation on the need for a robust application of ADR in this country. Plans are underway for Uganda to host Chief Justices of Africa early next year, 2024, to enable us to find common ground in the promotion and practice of ADR in our justice system. My Lord Chief Justices here present, you will be receiving communication from the Chief Justice of Uganda soon in this regard. And we look forward to hosting you alongside our brothers and sisters in the continent on this matter. This calls for thoughtful decisions in order to be relevant and meaningful. Given our varied experiences, I believe this conference will help us appreciate our peoples better and thus render them better service. We have, in this conference, an opportunity to share experiences on reaping from alternative dispute resolution, ADR, justice mechanism, case backlog management, fighting corruption, and dealing with banking and environmental justice, among others. The ADR is a fast-rising justice phenomenon. Its beauty and relevance lies in the self-evident fact that it is in accord with our African traditional justice system. Uganda held a national conversation on the need for a robust application of ADR in this country. Plans are underway for Uganda to host Chief Justices of Africa early next year, 2024, to enable us find common ground in the promotion and practice of ADR in our justice system. My Lord Chief Justices here present, you will be receiving communication from the Chief Justice of Uganda soon in this regard. And we look forward to hosting you alongside our brothers and sisters in the continent on this matter. I recognize and appreciate the tireless efforts made by the organizing committee of this conference under the chair of Honorable Justice Mike Chibita, Justice of the Supreme Court, to ensure the success of the conference.
The chairperson for East African Magistrates and Judges Association, John Edwis K. Lima, highlights the objectives of the conference.
What tools of work of your job do you need? And so the askari responded that I just need a bow and arrow. But because this man was very frugal, he said between the two, choose one and operate with that. So in most cases as judiciaries, we also find ourselves at this end of where we are told to choose between the bow and the arrow. So the outcome of all this is that as judiciaries, we should aim at contributing immensely to the social cohesion that helps in building shared values in societies, in this case our community, which should ultimately provide an enabling environment of wealth creation and sustenance of our people. Improvement in the quality of life of our people should become our inspiration for social cohesion, which will ultimately lead to the transformation of our societies. We, as the East African Magistrates and Judges Association, we pledge to always strive in realizing the said objective so that we ultimately make a fundamental contribution to the East African community. Before I take leave, I wish to thank the government of Uganda and the judicial administration headed by the Honorable the Chief Justice for having accepted to host this conference.
The 20th East African Magistrates and Judges Conference is held under the theme, harmonizing the best practices of judiciaries in East Africa.